So I just got my brand new Cisco 3504 wireless LAN controller in. This is the upgraded version to the 2504. And I figured I'd show you guys around the box a little bit, and then I'd get into some configuration, how you get it configured straight out of the box. So the first thing I'll show you is the front of it here. We'll go over what the ports look like. So starting on the left side, I've got two ports, top and bottom. The top port here is your out-of-band management port or your service port. This is crucial when you're initially setting up the box, because what happens is you plug into this, you power it on, and the controller actually sets up a DHCP server in there. Your machine gets a IP address off of this, and then you can configure it using the GUI straight off this port here. So I'll show you guys how to do that in a little bit here. Underneath it, that's your redundancy port. So if I had another 3504 box next to this one here, I can connect this port here to the other port on the other 3504, and I can run these boxes in an HA pair. Next to that is your console port. This is the same console port that Cisco's had on all their boxes since the beginning of time, probably. Next to that is a USB console port, so that's actually kind of nice. You get rid of the USB dongle with the serial connector and everything. So that's what those two ports are. Next to that, I've got my USB port. What we can use that for is upgrading code on the 3504. So I don't have to TFTP anything to this box if I didn't want to. I didn't have a TFTP server set up. I can get a memory stick, load the new version of code on there, pop it in, and then ingest it through the GUI right onto the controller through that port there. Next to that is an MGig port. That's a multi-gigabit Ethernet port. First controller I've seen this on, and one of the first Cisco devices I've actually had that had an MGig port on it. What this allows us to do is I can connect this to a Cisco switch at 1 gig, 2.5 gig, 5 gig, or 10 gig. And getting up to 5 gig, I can use regular Cat5e cabling if I wanted to, and I can get up to 5 gig on there between this box and my Cisco switch. Next to that guy there is 4 1 gig Ethernet ports. The last two ports here, so ports 3 and 4, those do support power over Ethernet. So if I do have a small branch office and I want to plug APs directly into this guy, I've got my last two ports right there that'll support the access points. They're 802.3 AT power, so you can plug directly into there, and they will power all the latest Cisco access points. Flip this guy around here, and on the back you can see the heatsink sticking out a little bit here, and then we've got the power connector right there. Here's the power brick, guys. This goes right here. It's kind of a special adapter here, special cable that goes in, and that's how you power the unit. Kensington lock slot on there, I guess, in case you're worried about getting stolen at all in a branch office, but that's there. Overall, really compact box, really nice looking. Cisco did a good job in just physically designing this thing. So what else did Cisco do when they upgraded from the 2504 to the 3504? So first thing on here is more power. So instead of 1 gigabit per second on the 2504, this thing is now capable of doing 4 gigabits per second through the controller. Great for all the new access points out there that are pushing 1, 2.5 gig on them. This box can handle a couple of them right on here. Great, again, for a small office. They've increased the capacity of this box. It supports up to 150 access points on it and up to 3,000 clients on this box. The other thing that we did that I kind of like is the increase in the Flex Connect groups. So now I could have up to 100 Flex Connect groups on this with 100 APs in each Flex Connect group. So talked a little bit about the box, show you guys what the ports are and how this thing comes together. Now I'll show you guys some of the configuration. So like I said before, take this thing out of the box, plug your computer in here via Ethernet in the top service port, and turn it on, and I'll show you guys how to configure this thing. Alright guys, so I've got my box plugged in. It has power, and I hooked up the network connections here. So again, make sure your computer is plugged into the service port here at the top. And when you're plugging this box into the switch, make sure you use port 1 on your gigabit Ethernet ports right here. The reason you're going to want to use port 1 is when you're initially setting this up, the AP manager AP Manager is how the access points actually communicate with the box and send traffic back and forth. That's defaulted to port 1 here. You could set it up on other ports or put this in a lag after. But for the initial setup, make sure that this box is connected into your switch via port 1, or else the APs won't talk to the controller properly. So you've got that all set up, and I'll show you on my computer here that we did indeed pull a IP address. I pulled a 192.168.1.3. If you're using documentation to set this up, I did notice that in some of the documentation Cisco provided, they actually had the wrong subnet here. They had a 192.168.0.x network. I've contacted a couple of people. I think they're going to get that changed, but this is what the controller gives out. So it's giving out addresses on the 192.168.1 network. The other thing that I wanted to point out before we get into the configuration here is going over the release notes for the 8.5. One of the things you'll notice here is we did get rid of support for a lot of the older access points on this. So if you do have some older access points floating around, you're going to want to check the 8.5 release notes to make sure that they're not affected here. We're going back to as far back as the 1600, and what's another old one? Like the 3500 here is about the oldest. So those, I mean, they're still pretty old. They're probably at least 5 to 7 years old if I had to guess. But if you've got any of the older like 1200 series or 1100 series access points, those are definitely not supported anymore in the newer versions of ArrowOS code. 8.5 is the first version of code that the 3504 supports. So you can't run 8.4 on it, you can't run 8.2 or 8.1 or 8.0 on it. It starts at 8.5. So that's important to make sure you check the release notes and make sure that your APs that you have are supported. All right, so let's get started here. So if you go back to your IP addressing here, you see you pulled a 1.3. The default router is 1.1. That's the address that we're going to use to actually talk to the controller here. So I'm going to go to the top, 192.168.1.1. And here's your initial express configuration here. So choose a username. Just going to do something simple, admin, password, and start. System name. So give your controller a name here. We're just going to call it test 1 controller. You can set up your time and date and all that in here. NTP server, optional. Management IP address. So this is your in-band management IP address information. So how do you want to reach your controller through the network, not the service port? So we're going to do a 192.168.149. Hopefully that address is not taken on my network. Put your subnet mask in there. 191 default gateway. Management VLAN ID if you need that. Right now I'm just going to leave that blank. Next, and then it's going to ask you to create your wireless networks. So I'm just going to put my first one in here. Test corporate, we'll call it, and we'll put in a WPA2 personal, so that's your pre-shared key. And put in your passwords there, your passphrases. Next again. And your virtual IP address, mobility group, all this stuff, you could always change this later. Your virtual IP address is really an address that's local to the controller. It's not a non-routed address. You can leave this. Sometimes I use 1.1.1.1. The only time you really ever see it is if you're using the guest splash page. It'll pop up in the browser. Again, leave it if you want to, or change it to something, again, that's just not routable. Hit next and apply and OK. So what's going to happen is the controller is going to configure itself. It's going to reboot, and then plug your AP in. Should find the controller, and everything should come up. I'll plug in my AP real quick just so we can verify that it works, and that's basically all there is to configuring this thing. So my controller rebooted, all the configuration is good on there. My AP came up, I plugged it in, and you can see the green light on there. That means that the AP is functional. Might be tough to see on the camera, the green light, but there's a green light on it. Solid green means it's connected to a controller. There's no clients on it. When you attach a client, that light should go blue. So we'll log in here real quick. Remember, I put that IP address on here for the management. So 192.168.128.149. We'll go to that. We'll log in. Now this is where you put in your credentials that you just created. And if you haven't been in a Cisco controller in a long time, there's actually this new splash page that they put up beforehand before you get into actually the configuration and everything. And you can do some configuration from here. They've got a best practices guide. They kind of make it look all, Web 2.0-ish. But to get back to the old school stuff, just click advanced here at the top. And now you're in it. So you can see the controller right here. I just went over what all these ports were and everything. You can see this is the port where I'm attached to my switch. If we scroll down, I can see that I have the AP attached to it. You can tell by that right there. And if I check on my Mac, sure enough, there's that test C SSID that we created. So we can click on that if we want to and log in, put my passphrase in, and we should be good to go. There you go. So you can see now I'm connected. I've got an IP address, and just for kicks, try going to Yahoo real quick. And that's it. That's the new 3504 controller with an access point attached to it, and how quick and easy it is to set it up. Thanks a lot, guys.